Hello and welcome to Do the Right Thing, a weekly writing prompt podcast. I'm Matias.
And I'm Jarvis.
Both of us love storytelling, but we know that sometimes it can be difficult to just sit down and write.
So, we're taking turns doing a challenge. Each week we set a timer for 30 minutes and write a complete short story. Our goal is to include at least 3 randomly generated words.
Then we read the stories and talk about what we learned in writing them. We finish off by talking about stories written by you listeners.
We're simply here to help you do the right thing. A Doof Media production.
So we're going to start off. First, I'll talk about my story. I'll read my story, talk about what I learned writing it and what we can, take away from it. Then we'll go into the listener story section, followed by some Doof announcements, because there's always so much stuff going on. It's kind of incredible. And then we'll finish off by, at the very end, announcing what next week's words are. And, of course, giving our little stories.
Yeah, so please try and listen to the end so you can have as much time possible to write your next story.
And we try really hard at the end to do the bits, so
we try very hard at the bits.
Yeah. All right.
This week we have history, warrant, decline, and cassette. So, Matias, what words did you use this week?
I ended up using the words history, decline, and cassette.
Okay.
Those were the ones that ended up being more evocative. It was a fun little bouncing through ideas thing where I started off with wanting to talk about the decline of something, and got into, I was like, okay, well let's do the history of a cassette showing a decline, basically.
Nice. And I know that this week was the last week of finals, so thank God we're completely done with all that. So I'm guessing, or at least I'm hoping, that writing this week was a little bit easier.
Yeah. I mean, I still did it last minute, but I think, but now, with the summer, and there's a lot of Doof stuff going on that I'm really excited to do. So actually, being proactive and doing things ahead of time is a serious plan now. I wrote, I think, basically half of this last night, finished it in the morning. And it was basically just a matter of filling in the gaps between stuff. It really has been easier now that I'm really letting myself just bounce from, line to line that I want to write.
Okay. So you've been jumping around the story instead of just writing it through.
Yeah, I started off, I don't remember quite which line was first, but yeah, so I'd write one line, go back, add another line, add a paragraph of description, go back to that first line, add in, who's the speaker, etc. So, but yeah, it was a good time. I don't have that much else more to say before we get into it, but yeah, we can go.
All right, cool. Well, I'm ready to listen to this fantastic Matias Mason story.
Tucked away in one corner right at the very edge of downtown, on the first floor of a skyscraper, was a little antique shop. The bell rang as a man walked in. He looked like a lawyer type, pressed suit, fancy hollow patterns, glowing faintly on the sleeves. Nothing distracting, mind you. It was the fancy stuff that was subtle. He wandered over to a section near the back, stopped to examine the object on the little wood pedestal there. The old man of the shop came over. "I see you eyeing the old cassette player," the old man said. "It's a good piece." "Yeah, it's really quite beautiful," the lawyer responded. "I don't have any tapes, though. Never been one to go back to the old stuff when it can get better sound from digi-speakers. So, it'd just be decoration. I'm usually more practical than that." The old man shook his head. No. He pressed a button on the tape player, popped out the cassette. Something about it seemed surprisingly modern, some tiny LEDs blinking in one corner. "This here's a universal tape encoder. Works off the digi on your phone. Automatically encodes whatever music file or what have you into tape. No need to buy anything else. And stuff on an old player sounds different. Makes you feel things. Here, let me show you." He put the tape in the player, fiddled with his phone, before hitting play. It depressed with a satisfying metal-on-metal click. The tape spun, and out came a popular neo-hip rock song from a couple years ago. One of the too few good songs to make it to top 40 and stay there while actually being a classic. The music came out nice and clear, but with an added air of wistfulness, like finding an old smell you forgot, and remembering something that has been gone without you knowing. The noise of the tape player, a light scratching run, was the slightest bit abrasive to the ears, but not to the soul. The old man let a good bit of the song play, nodding his head to the beat, before hitting stop. "What do you think?" "It sounds good," the lawyer said. "But really, I must decline your offer. Don't have room for knickknacks." "Come on," the old man pleaded. "Let me at least tell you the player's history. It's fascinating stuff, really, it is." The lawyer considered. "Just the highlights? Got a meeting in an hour, and have to eat lunch before." The old man's face lit up brighter than the neon lights outside the door. He swept his hand over the top of the cassette player, loosing somehow more dust. "See, this player came to me some years ago from a minor local musician. You might know him, actually. Little Freddie?" The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "The jazz rapper? Has that one hit with a harmonica solo?" "That's the one. An old friend. Anyway, before he was a musician, he was a grocery store manager. Had been for damn well 30 years. But he got the cassette player, listened to some tracks on it. Said it changed his ways. Now, I'm not saying it'll turn you into a musician, but it might loosen your perspective." "You said this had a long history." The lawyer idly spun an old globe with faded paints. "What else?" "Oh, yes, so glad you asked. I know of at least 3 other owners before Freddie. The first was, I don't know, maybe 80 years ago? I told you it was old. It was made by some fella in the 1970s. The name escapes me, but story goes that his whole life he'd wanted to be an artist. Had this one sculpture he'd been working on for a good long while. He had to put it on pause to follow Daddy's dreams. Papa disapproved, and he inherited the company. They made typewriters, I think. Kid had to grow up, run the business. And he did. Got all rich, or really kept his riches, but never had the chance to finish up that sculpture he'd cared so much about. Finally, he decided he was giving up on that dream, but he didn't want to throw out the sculpture. He'd spent years on the thing, and it was almost kind of nice. So he melted down the bits, and had this fancy cassette tape player custom made with the parts. The essence of all that unfinished art and abandoned dreams distilled and concentrated into a fancy player. It really was a work of art. Brushed steel that somehow still shined after so many years, with little embellishments of gold on the portable handle. The red play button and the slot for cassettes were instead made of polished dark wood. Frankly, it looked brand new, even though it was almost 80 years old. Pretty soon after, I'm sure listening to that player day in, day out, he got to thinking, why was he doing this, you know? Papa was dead at that point. Business could run itself, basically. So he retired. Got a cabin at the very edge of town, spent his time making sculptures. The business collapsed a few years later. Computers kind of made typewriters not so useful anymore. But he was happy. Poor then, but happy, so I hear. The second owner didn't change occupations, but had a different change. Realized she was gay, divorced her husband for a longtime friend. This was at the turn of the century, where that was still a real big deal. They went on to run a bakery together. Cute romance, really. I wonder if they're still together. What about the third? The third... Freddie didn't tell me much about the third. A friend of his. Got the player, spent time listening. Then rushed to Freddie, told him the stories, and then ran off. Left the country. Left without saying much to anyone. The old man shrugged. Haven't been able to track them down to get the rest of the story. The lawyer stared at the tape player. So, you're telling me it's cursed? All the owners abandoned their lives, yeah? Business was ruined, marriage destroyed, life abandoned? It ain't cursed. A player doesn't create the need for change. It simply revealed some uncomfortable truths, showed them what they truly cared about, made them follow their dreams. The lawyer was tracing his finger around the little slot where the cassette goes. It even felt wistful, like it was wood from a backyard tree, which was especially strange considering he didn't know anyone who'd had a tree in their backyard. Why would Freddy give this thing away? Why did any of them give it away? The old man shrugged. Who knows? When I asked Freddy, he just said, don't need it anymore, which makes me wonder just how it worked on him. Then again, it's not hard to imagine being uncomfortable running a grocery store. Alright, considering its history, if not the implication of magic, I'll take it. It'll be a good conversation piece, if nothing else. A bright smile flashed onto the old man's face. That's grand. Asking price is $300 for the player and the encoder. The lawyer frowned. $250? I haven't ruled out that this thing is cursed. Fine. It was collecting dust anyway, the old man said, keeping his cool. He rang the lawyer up, packed up the cassette player in a bag all nice, and after only a few minutes, had the lawyer ready to go. You enjoy that player, young man. And just remember one thing. He paused meaningfully. Don't give it water after midnight. The lawyer laughed. Yeah, of course. Thanks. Have a nice night. The old man watched the lawyer leave, watched the lawyer get in his car and drive away. After a few minutes, and that lawyer hadn't come back with second thoughts, he smiled. Finally, it was off his hands. He felt a weight melt and slip off his back like water. The old man looked around the shop, the countless antiques and old relics and knickknacks with histories and stories. All junk. He didn't have to pretend anymore. The cassette player made you follow your dreams, undergo some big change. Didn't quite mean your dreams were truly up to snuff. He'd been a doctor before all this, but he'd always liked old things. But antique shops are a lot of work to make money, and truly not as fun as you think when you get down to it. But dreams never are. The old man shuffled to the front door. He flipped the open sign to closed.
Wow. What a fantastic story. I really like this one.
Thanks.
Yeah, I love the subtle, natural cyberpunkiness, along with the slight mysticism around this cassette player. So what made you even think of this?
I think it's just a progression from the words. Basically, I started with, telling... I think I started with the line, I must decline. And then I was like, what did they declining? And then, let me tell you about its history, etc. So that's how the words help that happen. And then basically just progressed over time of okay, what is this thing? What does it do? What's the irony here? How can I, make this more complicated? And I ended up doing that little twist thing at the end where it's it made them follow their dreams, but actually it's for bad or something. I think I don't know if that really stuck the landing as I wanted it to, because I think I ended up kind of making the other people kind of be too good, and the this is bad actually is really quiet.
Well, I mean, I kind of chalk that up to, it does make you follow your dreams, but a person's dreams very much so varies. For the second owner, I think she decided to marry one of her close friends and open up a bakery, which, I mean, seems that they were happy in that, but of course a bakery doesn't really make that much money. So I don't know, I really liked how this cassette has changed these people's lives. And I think maybe something that can kind of add to the ending really sticking it is if the other people who owned it there's an air that maybe it didn't all turn out well, you know?
Yeah. Like where are they now kind of thing. Like, I think I had a little bit more in mind with Freddie, Little Freddie, the jazz rapper, where like he had the one hit and then kind of like nothing, and so he's like still like well known, but he's not like, you know, successful anymore. Yeah, so I don't know. It wasn't stuff that like really I kept with. You know, if I were to go back, I think I'd like, you know, make things more ironic and like, I think, you know, just to make it more extreme, if it like makes you want to follow your dreams, like dreams often change. Yeah. And so, you know, maybe this, you know, cassette player kind of like makes you always change this ever changing like idea that doesn't really truly exist. So that would be one path I might take.
Yeah. And on the topic of Little Freddie, I really like this depiction of this near future of 2050. How there's this nice meld between like well, first and foremost, there's this fascination at least in the shop owner's eye with old tech that to me kind of harkens to that one bottle episode of a Cowboy Bebop, where they went to that shop and they were looking for a DVR player to play the tape that someone sent Faye.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just really liked a lot of the world that you built. Also, I dig the Gremlins reference at the end.
Yeah.
That was very nice.
Thank you. You know, if there's ever going to be a magical shop where you get a like magical item or whatever, you always have to have the warning. And I was like, there's not really a warning that I want to give for this. So,
well, honestly, yeah. I think deciding to make it a joke definitely kind of sticks the landing for the story in a lot of ways, or at least gives us a deeper look into the shop owner. I mean, his dialogue is really, really great, and not only by you reading it, but also myself reading it, I could see so much character coming across in a lot of his lines, and I really, really liked it, and the kind of storytelling way that he spoke in.
Good. Okay. Good. You know, actually, I was taking some notes from you when I was doing the voices, especially like as I went on and like kind of figured out what the tone was. You know, you write a lot of nostalgic sort of stuff, so it's kind of like what does it feel like when Jarvis is writing his stuff. So a little bit hard to like describe exactly what I was, you know, stealing, but yeah, I was taking inspiration. So there you go.
Well, thank you. I guess.
Yeah, there's some particular lines where you're like, you start off like with a, I don't know, modifier to a previous statement, like, or with starting off with like a negative, like at the beginning, I have a thing with like the line at the end of the first paragraph, nothing distracting, mind you. It was the fancy stuff that was subtle. So like the nothing distracting, mind you, just feels kind of you. I mean, it's not like, I don't know if you've written that line in particular, but
no, yeah,
it's the sort of thing.
You like start with a contradiction to what you might think.
To like, I can see to what the audience might be thinking with the prior. Yeah.
Damn, you just figured out how I write.
So yeah, it ended up, you know, I was writing a nostalgic piece, so I was like, let's take some nostalgic language, right?
Nice. So in writing this nostalgic piece, like, are there any things that you kind of want to go back to? Maybe not with this story specifically, but just certain tones that you kind of enjoyed writing as you were writing it, or?
So with tones, you know, I think this is a fun character voice. I don't know if like I specifically want to write a story in this particular tone, but like maybe a different tone but with the same strength of voice is definitely something I would like to try. Yeah, and then in addition, I think, using the irony of like, magical artifacts or whatever is always more interesting. And I mean, I liked telling the little stories, and having kind of like a self-contained little narrative for each one.
Yeah.
It was kind of fun to think of like the different twist. I mean, they end up kind of being all a bit similar, but it was still, a fun thing to figure out. Because I was like, you know what, I probably shouldn't have them all just like leaving their prior job. That gets a bit samey. But
I think, and also I think one really, really cool thing that you did do is with the third owner, you added very little about what happened to him, which I kind of like in a contrast to how detailed this shop owner's account of the first two owners were. So yeah, I thought that was really, really cool.
Yeah, I was actually there was a thought that I could like have a thing where there's actually been a lot of other owners, but the shop owner just doesn't talk about them for whatever reason. Maybe they just aren't notable, or maybe they're a lot more negative.
People who like owned it and it went horribly wrong for them, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then I was a little bit I was a bit happy with like the lawyer doesn't think about how the shop owner is technically an owner, right? Because he's just selling it, right? It's not like his object, but he's connecting it to involving the person who's not normally in the story into the story, I think was kind of fun.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that I would see some improvement could really aid in would be this main character of the lawyer. I mean,
sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can see he is a stand-in for kind of us walking in to this shop, but I found that everything that he kind of said was very reactionary to what the shop owner is saying. And I mean, for this story, you don't really need a whole bunch of characterization of the actual lawyer, because I mean this story is really thriving with it being as short as it is. But I would have liked to at least have something that the lawyer does, or some way that the lawyer acts that I can kind of latch onto, so that as I am reading the lines from the actual shop owner, I already know how the lawyer is going to react, Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. I had the thought, and it didn't make it in just because time, to have the lawyer, talk about, at least imply what, his dream might end up becoming. So I think that's definitely a missed opportunity that I didn't take.
And then also that way it would link in like so much more at the very ending, when you kind of take into consideration that whatever the lawyer's dream is will come true, but it won't be what he thinks it is. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, definitely. Yeah, if I were going to go back, I definitely would add motivations and complications to the story via, what is this character of the lawyer? Yeah.
And I think I just
all right.
Oh, well, I just have one more question.
Okay, yeah.
So as you were writing this, I know when we sit down to write, we typically focus on one thing, whether it is the dialogue or the setting or just the overall tone. So while you were writing this, what did you pay the most attention to?
I think definitely the voice. Okay. Having a character in there and letting myself, kind of write in a different way than I normally do. That was almost certainly the main thing. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Which I think it mainly I was writing the narration and the old man's dialogue through all the old man's voice the whole time, so it's kind of in character the whole time. Yeah, and it's I'm kind of using a stereotype already. I'm using the old man that runs an antique shop telling you an old story. So it's using that railroad, I can summon up that voice pretty easily. Yeah. Like, I think part of it is like, if you're like, if you were doing improv, right, and like you were suddenly handed a character, what's the voice that they would use? Like, you can come up with a voice, right? Like, how would, if you're handed a card that says old man shopkeeper, what's the voice they're going to use when they describe things? Yeah.
Fucking instantaneously know exactly how that person would speak. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I think, with, crafting a good story is then you like complicate that, you add in more stuff. But I think starting off with like a trope is not that bad of an idea.
Yeah, no. And I mean, especially in this one, it works very well. And like, I can see this like old man just standing in this fairly empty shop waiting for someone to like walk through the door. So yeah, really, really, really great story. Really, I absolutely loved it.
I'm glad you liked it. All right, so let's get into the listener story section.
Well, first and foremost, if you haven't read any of these stories, please pause this podcast right now because we're going to spoil all of them, and they all deserve to be read once through without knowing anything about them.
I mean, wait for like about 30 more seconds for us to read who the writers are, but then yes, pause and then go read them. They've got great twists and turns, and when we talk about them, you're not going to be able to experience that proper twist and turn.
Yeah.
All right, so who are we talking about this week, Jarvis?
This week we are talking about stories by Paradox,
Nipiton,
Sarah Penguin,
Kausubalu V2,
and Bisexual Punch Party.
All right, so let's get down to it.
All right, so first up on the docket is Bisexual Punch Party with a untitled story.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting story. It's got a classic arc here. We have this arc, like a story arc.
Yeah, just
like character arc.
I was laughing.
Okay, so we follow this guy named Giuseppe, I think, or is it Giuseppe?
I think it's Gillespie.
Gillespie. Okay, I'm going to say Gillespie. It's probably wrong.
Let's call him G-Man.
We might, yeah, I'll just call him G-Man. All right, so G-Man, I'm sorry, Bisexual Punch Party. So G-Man is an alcoholic, but he's going off to have his one last bottle, right? Totally.
Which...
even though he tried to quit Wednesday.
It's never just the last bottle.
Right, exactly. So he goes to... he doesn't go to his normal places. He heard about a place online, and he goes to that to get this fancy one last bottle, right? It's significant, right? Mm-hmm. So he goes in, and we kind of already tell that this is not a normal place. There's this one, it's the trope of the exotic, magical place with the exotic. Forwarder, storekeep person, is there, and then like the whole store is like hugely, not organized, right? So you have like beers next to, wines and whatever. But there's all sorts of, weird bottles with like weird stuff in them. And he ends up picking a bottle of tequila with a scorpion tail on top and a tequila worm at the bottom. And it's like all spiked and clearly not good. I didn't know that was a thing with tequila. I think I'd heard it before, but that sounds gross. The worm? Yeah.
Yeah. Only certain bottles have it. And legend says that if you do eat the worm, you will have hallucinogens.
Fun.
Yeah. But that's false.
So for those who don't know, some bottles of tequila have a sort of worm at the bottom.
It's specifically only one kind of...
Yeah. It's like mezcla or something.
Yeah, something like that.
It's from Mexico, I believe. Anyway, so he goes to the clerk. goes to purchase it, but the clerk, gives him that classic, magic shop warning.
Yeah.
Says, I know you're trying to quit, but whatever you do, do not finish this bottle, and especially don't eat the worm. So of course he goes home. The first night he drinks 2/3 of it, and then but then he gets afraid of it. He sees the worm and it's all spiked and gross, and he tries to put it off. And he almost seems to resist it, but then no. At the very end, he decides to finish the bottle, and he eats the worm. And it turns out that it truly would be his last bottle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. I really, really like this story. I mean, I felt that it was a fantastically horrifying journey about addiction and the road to sobriety, along with like a lot of those false truths that we kind of tell ourselves when we are trying to get clean of whatever substance. So I thought it was really cool. I also like this sort of subtle mysticism around this worm in this bottle. So yeah, I thought it was really cool.
Yeah. What I thought it was like really interesting, at the end, getting the worm is actually like not super easy, and it really shows like how intentionally self-destructive G-Man is being. Mm-hmm. He finishes the bottle like a fucking idiot. He slammed it immediately, and that was it. The final bottle, the last dregs. The worm is still in there, so he like tips the bottle, and it doesn't go out the hole. So he like smashes the bottle to get it.
I know,
and
and I'm guessing he smashed it on his table.
Against the counter, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So there's glass in like every place, and he just gently picks up this spiky worm and downs it.
Yeah. So, yeah, and it was, truly horrible because like the spines, stab into his fingers even before he puts it in his mouth. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was, so it's a pretty brilliant, descent into self-destruction. I thought it was really well delivered. I mean the actual like horror of like eating a spiky worm, it just makes stronger the horror of self-destruction, and I just really enjoyed the arc here. It's really well executed.
Yeah, definitely. I think the only thing that I could see being improved upon at least when it comes to kind of setting up this horror when it comes towards this worm is after he finishes those 2/3 of the bottle, it would be great if there was a bit more there between the days that he slightly sips on it and eats the worm, where I guess the horror towards his worm and also the future of what his addiction may look like is kind of talked about. But
yeah, I would like especially that last like rallying moment to maybe he will really quit, right? But then something bad happens and he returns to old habits, and basically just to make the fall even stronger.
Yeah.
All right, so the next story we're going to talk about is by Nipiton with Joy to the World.
Joy to the world.
Yep. Or Joy to the New World. Unless I already said that. Anyway, so we open on this pretty horrifying imagery. They watched the tear weep, and the bodies fell like rain. So we have some characters are on a hill looking out over a landscape, talking about how they've all like ended up in this place. With the multiple time periods, we have a gunslinger, an old like noir detective, a samurai, and a student. And people are
cast of characters.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, and they're witnessing literally people falling from the sky, and most of them die upon impact. But some people, like the detective, I believe, survived because they landed on a giant pile of bodies and were able to climb out. So it's pretty horrifying. And this is, there's this horrible mix. They see a Boeing 777 they fall out of the tear, flying away, and most of them had never seen it before. But what
is a Boeing 777?
It's like the big airplane we use now. It's like the biggest airplane we use for normal passenger flights, I think.
The big boy.
I mean, you could look it up. Yeah. So we kind of get some quick characterizations. They fit the tropes pretty well. The student is super whiny, though. I think that's the only one that I really wanted to see more of, because I just didn't know, with the rest of them have a time period, so I wasn't sure if this was a modern student and what the age was. So, but they are interrupted when a velociraptor appears out of nowhere, tears the gunslinger's arm off. The gunslinger falls off the cliff, and then out from the woods comes a little girl with really colorful braces who is controlling the raptor, and is punishing them basically for stealing the food of her camp of kids, basically. She gets the food back, demonstrates some Japanese just to show that she's ridiculously skilled. And she tells them, "Hey, have any of you seen an orthodontist? Because I just need these braces off," which is just an added air of ridiculousness. Yeah. And then she lets them go. So it's really, really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really fun story. I love this this juggling act between all these characters, trying to give each person the necessary shine. And I just loved how outrageous this story really is, and all these kind of different parts that come and go. And especially Joy at the very end reminded me so much of, I don't know if anyone else has read or seen the Runaways, but the character of Gertrude, which, soft spoilers, can control a velociraptor. So,
okay, I did not know that was already a thing.
Please read Runaways. It's good.
All right. I really enjoyed this. It was just a lot of fun seeing all these characters interact, and just the kind of ridiculousness, especially because the tone jumps all over. But I think that's part of the point.
It really works with it, because the story itself seems like it's jumping between so many different colorful characters and different scenes, to where when the tone shifts, it makes perfect sense. So yeah. All right, the next story is by Paradox with Transaction 5.
Ooh, so this is this is the fifth entry in the series that Paradox has been writing with the various assassins in a kind of cyberpunk place that are named after birds, right? With the crow and the raven.
The bird people.
We've talked about them. Yeah, the main character is Sparrow. Until now, she's been renamed to Magpie, which is really fun. So we're definitely interested in what that means for the future. We open up on a sidewalk that is crowded with modded cyberpunk people. There's some really cool world building here, and told in an interesting way. There's a really cool show here where we talk about how the sidewalk is big enough for 3 people to walk side by side comfortably, but because there's mods, there were easily 5 people crammed onto the sidewalk in most places, but in some places only 2, because there's gigantic people as well. So it's kind of all over the place. So there's this really cool. I think that's a cool way to show is you give these 2 facts, and you allow us to imagine all the implications there, right? Some people are really small, obviously, with 5 people right next to each other, and some are gigantic, etc. So I thought that was cool. So we go through, we get some world building with what this group of assassins is like. We get to a secret doctor's place, and we kind of gather that they're going to do the augmentations on Magpie to turn her into one of them. And we meet Pigeon, which is kind of the messenger of them, right? Like carrier pigeon. And Magpie is just like weirded out that now she's like one of them. And she's handed like a data pad and shown what she's going to look like at the end of this. And they've kind of picked it out for her, but she gets to choose some of the aesthetics, which is a little concerning. Yeah. And she's going to get like weapons in her arm, I assume. But yeah, I thought it was another really cool entry in the series. And of course, as always, I'm really interested in seeing where this is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's just great world building on top of what has already been set up, and I do find that within the argument that they have, a lot of the character is shown, and like as this story continues, and especially in this last entry, I kind of got subtle Cyberpunk 2077 vibes, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this, as usual, and especially love the more, the modification stuff is really interesting. I'm interested in seeing how Magpie, deals with being augmented and how she feels about it. So
yeah, very much.
So the next story is by. Go ahead.
So the next story is by Cassette V2 with prologue, Magic Rings.
So we have Cassette V2 talks about how they've kind of incorporated multiple elements of their stories, and I think I can see them. It kind of depends if I'm remembering the correct stories, but I can see some of those elements. We have this hedge mage named Rav, who he seems very nervous. Apparently, he has accidentally written a magic tome. It happens. We have some fun world building and character building. When they say stuff like writing tomes is one of those things that happen to other people, court wizards and merchant sons, not him, right? So it's like. Which kind of shows us, what are these tomes? Who can we expect to do that? And how does Rob feel about it? And so he has this tome. He can't read it, but he can understand kind of like what the magic in it is. And other people can't read it either. And so these inquisitors show up, and they're very threatening. They call the tome like a demonic tome, basically. And basically it turns sour pretty quickly. Rav casts some magical wind spells to escape. What?
He yelled push, and it pushed them.
Oh, yes. And runs out to the streets. He knows that they're going to catch him, so he throws the book into some merchant stalls because he knows he'll always be able to find it, but then they catch him. So we know, considering this was a prologue, and Castle Blue says that they're going to continue writing stuff like this, that he's probably going to have to escape and to find it again.
Yeah.
So some really cool stuff. We see the Inquisitors are using some sort of blood magic, which is a little bit concerning. But yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I really liked the world building of this kind of world where this sort of magic is being cracked down on. It's not really something that I've really seen, so I thought that was a really cool aspect. And also throughout we get plenty of stuff about Rav, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing where this could go, and just kind of seeing what all this world has to offer.
Yeah, I found the most interesting stuff was seeing how Rav kind of communicates, the state that he's in and how he thinks through the narration. He talks about how after he's running, he thinks to himself, but he was not a fit man. His lungs hurt. He needed to lose his prize, and other stuff like that. So we kind of see how he's feeling about this.
Yeah.
All right. The final story we're going to talk about is by Sarah Penguin with The Spy Master and the Princess, Part 3, Operation Sneaky Princess.
By the way, I absolutely love that subtitle.
Yeah, it's really
Operation
fun.
Sneaky Princess.
Yes. Yeah, so this is obviously Part 3 in this series where the Spy Master has rescued a princess who's been tortured by her evil uncle in a dungeon for since she was 12. And so now they've arrived at the town. They're still incognito, but they have to basically get free. And while they're there, the Spy Master is going to set up to do some spying on the local mayor, basically. But she's not doing that immediately. So first she goes to an inn. We have some fun relationship kind of building because the princess doesn't want to be left alone. She wants to be with the only person that she knows she could be safe with, which is the Spy Master. They go to do some spying somewhere else, sneaking past some guards and stuff, and some people notice the princess, but they brush off the idea that she might be her, which is a cool, what's the word? Lampshading, the concern that people are going to recognize her.
Mm-hmm.
The Spy Master is doing the spying, writing down all the stuff that she can see in one of the mayor's offices, and then a soldier comes in and wants to take advantage of them, and the Spy Master threatens to maim and kill him, and he runs away. And so basically then they get ready to go. So it's mostly some plot building, some relationship building between these characters, and just a tiny little sprinkle of action.
Yeah. So yeah, I really liked how much time we get between these two characters, and definitely really them both being characterized very nicely, and how they kind of depend on each other, and I really dig that. Along with of course the continuance of this world building, and mm-hmm. It was a really great entry. Yeah,
I think there's a couple places where the description and kind of rushes a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has a little bit of that stuff from before, where I think taking a minute to breathe, to stay in one location and kind of let the characters think and feel would be a benefit to this. But that said, I really like these characters' interactions. I like the plot. I think there's a little note in there about how she's going to track where the food is going to find the army, which makes a lot of sense. And I thought that was a cool little, I don't know, just what's the word? Insight on how something like this might work.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of interesting stuff being done in this story.
Yeah. On that, actually, I wonder if a good or a interesting exercise could be writing another entry, but they're only in one place.
Oh, like spending time in one room, for example, or one particular,
yeah, like in
one scene, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, wouldn't be a bad idea. Mm-hmm. All right, but that's all the stories we have this week. If you want to be like all these amazing people, wait, nope, that's not how it works.
Nope. We have to thank them first.
Yes, that's right. So that's all the stories we have this week. But of course, we want to say thank you to every single person who wrote. You guys did a great job. It's so satisfying seeing, all the number of comments and knowing that there's a lot of brilliant stories in there. I saw some great discussion. Yeah. You guys did a really good job. So thank you to Ace of Sword.
Thank you, Zakatiggy.
Thank you, Mizey1.
Thank you, Bisexual Punch Party.
Thank you, Haunt of the Heron.
Thank you, Nipotin.
Thank you, Paradox.
Thank you, Kasubalu V2.
Thank you, Sarah Penguin.
And also, we have to thank all the people who also left comments.
Yeah, you guys did a great job. I saw some really insightful stuff and some back and forth, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, so thank you, Sarah Penguin.
Ace of Sword,
Paradox,
Hunt of the Heron,
Bisexual Punch Party,
and Blue V2. You guys did a fantastic job.
Yeah, fantastic job. So, if you want to be like all these wonderful writers, you can do that by going to /r/do-the-right-thing on Reddit and picking the most recent week and submitting your stories. And it's pretty simple. All you really have to do is set a timer for 30 minutes and use 3 of 4 randomly generated words for that week.
And which will be announced at the end of this podcast.
Exactly.
You, of course, can also and should leave comments on your story and other people's stories. Talk about what you learned in writing. Talk about what you think you could improve and what other people could improve. Of course, be constructive. Not that I've seen any issue with that. And if you leave at least 2 comments, and that includes the one on your own story, you will get an added chance to get selected every week. Which carries through even if you didn't write a story for a week. So if you don't have the time to write, but you do have the time to read, it wouldn't hurt to go and leave some comments.
If you want to be like all of our wonderful writers and get the words for that week as soon as possible, well, first and foremost, just keep on listening and we'll tell you. But if you want to see them again, you can go to our Twitter, which is @RightThingCast.
That's right. You could also if you want to let us know about anything, you can post in the discussion threads, which I forgot to post for last week, I think. But I'll post them soon. Or you can send us an email at rightthingcast@gmail.com.
Yeah. Well, all right. So, Matias, what's going on in Doof?
So much is going on in Doof. Actually, a really big thing is Ward is ended and Wildbow's new work has begun. So if you haven't gone and read that, you absolutely can, and you can be caught up on a Wildbow work. It's called Pale, so you can find that at I think pale.wordpress.com, I believe. Let me actually double check that.
I'm actually pretty excited because this is the first Wildbow work that I'm actually caught up on. So
did you read it yet?
I did, yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, it was a really good
Chapter 2 is out at time of recording.
Oh, really? Cool.
The prologue and Chapter 1.
Okay. Yeah. I absolutely love how much talk about blood there is.
It's a fantastic opening. The first chapter is great as well. It's the website name is palewebserial.wordpress.com. I'm going through the effort of saying the whole thing because Google hasn't learned about it yet. So if you search Pale Wildbow, it might not come up. But it also, you can find it through the sidebar links on any of his other works. But yeah, it's great. We started the Deep Impact boys are taking over and are starting a new podcast called Pale Reflections. I'm really, really excited to hear them talk about that prologue. The cover art for it's fantastic too. Just there's a lot of cool stuff going on. Pale is also set in the world of Pact. It's not a sequel, so you don't have to read Pact to read Pale, but it's fun to do so. So of course it's pretty natural that they're the ones carrying over. And on related as well, as I've mentioned in weeks past, I'm going to be starting a new podcast with Clarence talking about Worm. So I'm going to formally announce that next week. So I'm really, really excited about that. It's a big, cool thing going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of prep work to be done there. But of course, there's always so much going on around here. If you want to support us, the best way to do that would be to go to patreon.com/doofmedia and donating $1 a month or whatever else you can afford.
Yeah. And then also, if you want to support us directly, just tell a friend that you think might be into this podcast about us. The best way to kind of spread the love of Do the Right Thing is by word of mouth. So yeah, definitely. If you know any other writer friends that you think might want to listen to The Right Thing Boys, well, just send them our way.
Mm-hmm. Or you could also leave us a rating and review. It's funny, I keep checking the Apple Podcast review, and I mean, we've got great ratings. We got a 5.0, so thank you so much. But we have 0 reviews. So when people look up our podcast, they just don't know what to think.
Yeah, it's like, what is this?
So, I mean, I'm not going to complain about a 5-star rating. That's kind of pretty cool to see that, but it's also just good so other people can know what they're reading, what they're going to be listening to. And of course, just to mention, there's so many patron rewards. At the $20 level, the Doof Warrior level, you get to produce an episode of the Doofcast about a movie or short story. And after that, you also get to join the Council of Doof, which is a great Doofcast reward level where you get to participate in the council, where you guys get to decide one movie for the Doofcast to review per week, and also vote if that should go into the Doof canon. So which ones are the best movies to make it in there. I think next week actually is our next Doof Council episode of Doofcast, and I think it's going to be on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So kind of a huge deal.
That is a huge deal. That's like what?
Yeah.
That was the best film to come out of 2018? 2019.
Sounds about right.
Sounds about right.
I don't know. 2018, I think, yeah. And 2018 was not a bad year for movies. So that's, yeah. All right. That's all we have this week. So let's find out the new words, Jarvis.
So the words for next week are extraterrestrial, fee, lend, and sentiment.
So we have extraterrestrial, as in something not of this earth, right? Something
alien,
not terrestrial, right? Alien usually, but I'm sure, if you want, you can do a weird take on that.
Yeah.
Fee, as in like a cost, a payment that you have to do for something else. Lend, as in to lend money or to lend a hand. So to like let someone borrow something. And sentiment, as in feelings, basically. The sentiments you have for something is the feelings you have for something. Usually it's like being sentimental is usually like being sad, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it also goes to positive stuff. So, Jarvis, what's your story going to be?
My story next week is going to be a loose take on the movie Paul. If you remember, the movie Paul, which came out in 2015, I think, was about a extraterrestrial alien who came down and decided to hang out with 2 stoner bros, right? But my take is that instead of coming down and chilling with 2 stoner bros, he's gonna chill with 2 tax associates who specialize in lending money out to certain loan sharks with a very hefty fee. And through this, contrary to the real movie Paul, where he learned about life and love and what it means to be human, in this one, Paul's going to learn everything about our economic system from the ground up. And by doing that, he will take it back to his own planet and create the very first capitalist society outside of the U.S.
Wow.
And when he looks back on the U.S., he'll be filled with sentiment of all the crazy times he spent with those 2 kooky tax associates.
Wow, brilliant!
Thank you.
I think that might win an Oscar.
I think so, that kind too. Of movie. I mean, Paul did, so.
It's a coming of age. I don't think Paul won an Oscar. I'm going to say that's probably not true. Yeah, I don't think it's that kind of movie.
I honestly don't know of 3 people that have seen and or heard of Paul.
I did see advertisements for it, and then I specifically didn't watch it.
Because it's stupid.
So my story will also have to do with extraterrestrials. But going a slightly different angle, you see, humans are actually pretty special because we're the only ones that are able to generate sentiments. Most aliens only have like a single feeling, and they just really don't understand. So what they do is they come down to Earth, and for a nominal fee, we get to express our sentiments to them. Usually it's a roast. Usually we roast the aliens, not physically, but emotionally. We just really tear down their self-esteem. And it's just such, yeah, exactly. With you four-legged eyes kind of looking guy. And just the emotional turmoil that generates is just like a really fascinating experience for them. And so in exchange for those sentiments, they've been lending us their spaceships, which really has gone a long way toward expanding the human empire, especially because, you know, you can roast the diplomats, right? Their self-esteem is so low and they don't know what to do with it. They could be like, hey, just like, you know, it'll be, if you give us all your technology, I think you might actually be a really cool person. And they'll be so thankful that they give you all their technology, and then you use that and you take over their planet, and then you force them into our capitalist system. And now that they have emotions, they're just as miserable as you are, and you can feel better about that.
I really like how the only major thing that like humans have over the fucking aliens is cool points,
feelings, and capitalism. So these are just the kind of things that you learn on any given episode of
Do the Right Thing.
We did it.